Hi folks, welcome to the iWrite Radio podcast, videocast on Sundays. So we've got to look at Marr and Gordon Brewer. We're also going to have a chat about a Guardian article that came out. I think there's something in the Times as well related to it. I think we could really refer to this as Dead Cat Sunday when it comes to the Marr show. Jimmy, you were a little bit put out by Mr. Marr.
Well, it just it strikes me as a bit strange that this sad excuse for a government seemed to sign off on politics for the summer by letting Andrew Marr run their foreign policy for the next wee while. He attempted to ambush the Chinese ambassador, the Russian ambassador. Some of the things that he came out with were outrageous. Showing a video of unknown provenance, saying that it's thousands of people being tortured, and asserting that there was even one on Sky News, mate, where the lassie asserted that a plane load of human hair from these people who are being tortured had been stopped at an airport in America. No backup whatsoever to that story.
Excuse me a minute.
Just a complete trope almost. It was a hatchet job, Andrew Marr, the day, and to be honest, I thought the Chinese ambassador's answers were one that stuck in my mind, Stuart, when they were telling us how terrible China was and so nationalistic and under the heel of the Communist Party, and the Chinese ambassador turned around and says, listen, our policies haven't changed. It's you that have changed. And how can we possibly argue with that when we replaced Obama with Trump and Boris Johnson is now Prime Minister? When they say our attitude to them has changed, they're 100% correct.
Absolutely. And I mean, they both, the West and China, made a deal 20 years ago when, that they would engage in trade for the benefit of both. But things have changed only within the last few years because of Trump's obsession with make America great again. It's it's America first. It's isolationism, which is deeply rooted in republicanism. It may not be actually deeply rooted in Trump, but he used it and is still using it to connect to the Republican base.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you take a look at some of these American companies like Apple. Apple became the biggest company in the world and the richest company in the world purely because they outsourced all their manufacturing to China and also outsourced most of their profits to offshore areas where they don't have to pay tax. And now that doesn't suit the American government, they want to absolutely change how things are operated.
I think you're making this more complicated than it is, guys. I really do think this is all dead cat stuff. Trump in America looking for somebody to pick a fight with to try and get his polling up. Boris Johnson in the UK looking for something to distract us from the facts of the coronavirus epidemic. He needs to get everybody back to work because his Tory support, well, his Tory financial backers need it. He doesn't want it talked about. So let's have a fight with Russia, China, pick somebody to have a fight with. It fits in with what Trump's doing. It's all distraction, smoke and mirrors.
Okay, so what are we supposed to be not looking at, Norrie?
Well, in America, Trump doesn't want you looking at the coronavirus situation. He just wants to be a big, strong, hard man because he thinks his base will support that.
Norrie, did you and I see the same report this morning that according to one of these reports, he's got a 10% chance of being re-elected now?
Well, I mean, that's the numbers now. That's why he's looking to change things. He's only got till November.
He's got a 1% chance, apparently, of winning the popular vote, and that's according to The Economist.
Oh, that's right. That's what I saw, Jimmy, the Economist headlines.
Well, you cast your mind back to Thatcher. Now, Thatcher was polling absolutely terribly until the Falklands.
Until the Falklands, yeah.
And then she became a heroine. And it applies to them all. I've never done it, but I'd be interested to see how many US presidents have gone to war before an election to make their polling look better.
You nearly had me imagining you. I thought you were about to say, Jimmy, I've never tried it, going out looking for a fight to avoid talking to the wife or something like that. I don't know.
Well, there's an interesting thing. I don't know if I was watching a bit of American news last night because I had a wee tad of insomnia, and there's an interesting wee kite being flown in Portland in Oregon, where it has federal police force. That's what they described it as last night, a federal police force who are antagonizing a situation in Portland. It's a federal building that's been getting vandalized, and both the mayor of Portland and the governor of Oregon want these federal police forces out of Portland. Trump's refusing. It's been directed from Washington. And it's an awfully interesting kite, because if he can start almost wee mini riots by chucking in the feds, he'll do that if it can bump up his numbers.
They're lifting demonstrators randomly off the street.
Aye, and they're not identifying themselves as to who they are. You don't know if they're the FBI.
I was going to say, I wonder where they get that idea from. Mr. Putin, I would think.
Well, they were doing it with the rendition policy as well, remember?
No, it's definitely a kite being flown, mate, because if he gets away with it in Oregon, which is possibly one of the least populated states in America, there's every chance that he tries it in places like Chicago and that would create a massive stink.
Well, the last thing I saw in the Portland situation was there's been a no-fly zone declared over Portland.
No fly for what?
No fly for aircraft.
What about drones?
Well, that will apply to drones as well.
I would imagine the drones are keeping an eye, private drones are keeping an eye on what the feds are up to.
Well, I would underline that this is off Twitter, so I'm not going to claim that it's
let's be honest, mate. There's not a domestic demonstrator or organization in America that presents any threat from the air. Not that I know of.
Can I just rewind a bit to where we got to, how we went down this, a bit of a side alley, but I mean, of course it's important, but it was about the Marr program. Now, can I have an evaluation? How did the Russian and the Chinese ambassador get on out of 10?
I thought they were fine. I thought the Chinese ambassador was excellent, mate. I'd have given him about an 8 or a 9. He's dealt with Marr before and he's slapped him down before. The Russian ambassador, it's tough to defend some of the things that Putin's done, but he really just points at you and says, look, I mean, his example, when they asked him about Scotland in particular, Stuart, did you guys interfere in the Scottish election? He's basically like, why would we? Our only interest with Scotland is that we want to trade with Scotland and that we're open for business. That's it.
I thought the Russian came across very well, because Russian ambassadors in the past tend to be quite aggressive. This guy basically just laughed it all off.
He did. It was a marked difference for the last guy, but then the last guy did go back to Moscow. Didn't remind we discussed that. He got the Order of Lenin for basically, he took the credit for Brexit.
Aye.
So what we're looking at is a Marr program where we might have sat down before it come on and decide what we'll give them all marks out of 10 for how they performed. And the entire program was all about Marr himself, apart from the very start. And if we're giving good marks to the Russian ambassador and the Chinese ambassador, what the hell does Marr get in the way of a score?
He gets a 2, but I'll tell you what, Lisa Nandy gets a 10 if you're a right-wing Tony Blair type labourist. She came across as exactly what she is, a creature of Blair and Brown.
That might have been the point at which I started shouting at the TV when she came on.
An early start then.
And what about, God, who was it? Was it Dominic Raab?
Yeah, he never gets any more than a 3, mate. He gets 2 for tying his shoelaces and 1 for doing his tie. That's about it.
I'd switched off by then for safety's sake.
He looks like a cartoon character. Talks like a cartoon character.
Is that this guy? Is that the forehead he's got?
This guy is our international face. I mean, he's got as much gravitas.
Whoa, Norrie, wait a minute. Who did
as
he
a roast
follow?
tie?
Who did he replace?
Right.
Well, even that's not the point.
What, Boris Johnson? Anybody
I know,
can follow Boris Johnson and look good.
Yeah, but we've had hundreds of years of history of very capable men of all political persuasions doing that job. And we've got a couple of monkeys in the last, 3 years.
And monkeys that wouldn't earn enough peanuts to keep themselves fed.
Oh,
if they were paid on talent.
It's really quite scary. Well, Marr, as I say, as far as I'm concerned, was the BBC underwriting the policy of Dominic Cummings.
Aye, it was very much a Cummings-based programme, wasn't it?
Yeah, let's throw dead cats all over the place. One of them will stick.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that was really genuinely important.
And then after that, we got Stuart's favourite, Mr. Brewer.
Oh my God. Can I just give a summary of that before we get into the meat? It came on and he was talking to Lindsay Buse, and they set the scene with, they were already going into it. Apparently there was a report from somebody in some Unionist paper complaining about the schools would not be going back on the 11th after all because the teachers were worried about PPE, and it doesn't matter. And then there was a reference to the fact that this report that we will be speaking to shortly in the Observer, and then for a completely outlier from this Lindsay Buse, she's not being asked about anything, said that Professor Curtis has said that, you know, things are looking good for the independence at another referendum. However, he sat down and he had two interviews, just two. One was Mike Russell, and it was all about the power grab, the issue. And one was Mike Russell, and the other was, would you believe, Alistair Jack, Secretary of State for Scotland, who's appeared. Now, why didn't they appear together? Look, there's three of us on this screen. Why didn't they have the two interviewees side by side? Why did they put the Scottish Nationalists first and the Unionists second? These were all editorial decisions. And so, I mean, I'll let you guys get into the meat, but look at, before you even start, you're talking about corrupted.
There is no way Alistair Jack could be on the same platform as Mike Russell and win the argument. Mm-hmm. That's why.
That's why. Aye. Mike Russell would absolutely take him to school, tie him up in a couple of knots, untie him again, tie a bit of string to his ankle and fling him out the window for a kite. Because that's how lightweight the Secretary of State for Scotland is. I thought it was, you're right, the editorial decisions, the whole thing, it stank of hypocrisy to closely question Mike Russell and hold Mike Russell to account, and then basically say to Alistair Jack, would you like to rebut that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think that Brewer tried hard.
No, he didn't.
I'm sorry, Stuart.
Hard as an exaggeration.
For Brewer, that was trying hard. He asked him 3 times.
Okay.
And that is not Brewer's style. I thought he tried quite hard. And I mean, he's not a man that can torture an answer out of anybody. You know, he's not in the same league as Mr. Neil. Mm-hmm. But I thought he tried quite hard, so I'm not going to be too hard on him today.
I thought Mike Russell delivered the line of the morning, though, when he was talking about how Westminster sees its sovereignty, and he called it a bizarre and medieval view of politics.
Yeah,
it's quite true.
But I mean, the fact of the matter is, Mike Russell did at one point use the word liar.
Mm.
Oh yeah, because he was challenged. I mean, I'm not saying Gordon Brewer was particularly hard on Mike Russell, but the whole structure, obviously, we've agreed now, that was all set up. Mike Russell came out one term right at the end to hem in devolution. I'm not quite sure what that, but that's partly what they were doing. He decided, and he did say.
I think that what I found most interesting was we're back to this thing that the BBC do very well. They ignore what the facts tell you, and the facts tell you that this government, this Tory government under May, under Cameron, and now under Johnson, are quite happy to tell barefaced lies, to make promises they have no intention of keeping.
Yeah.
History in the last 10 years has proven that they're quite happy to do that.
Can we remind them
consistently?
All right.
And to ask Mike Russell if he had any proof of that, which Brewer did,
Aye.
was ridiculous.
That shows up Brewer for claiming that he
We
has.
need to remind the listeners that it is actually in the BBC Charter. They have a responsibility to defend the state.
No, they have a responsibility to defend the union.
Well, I think you're taking that one step further. But
The state is the government in power at the time. That's not what it says.
Oh, well, I mean, let's remind people too that at the time of the 2014 election, the British government employed civil servants in Whitehall to spread false propaganda, and then having successfully, won the election to the referendum, they handed out gongs, awards, British Empire medals to all these civil servants.
Is the government's argument really? Is it fair to call it propaganda?
Sorry.
No, is it fair to? I mean, yeah, they were fighting a referendum. These people worked for the Westminster government.
You really want to go down that road? I don't think we should go down that argument at the moment.
Well,
2014.
no, I would like to think that the Scottish government can now use our civil service up here in the same way.
I don't think they'll get away with that.
No, I don't think so either. But when they get slapped down for it, we should point out the medals that were handed out.
Look, what about that it doesn't work?
Sticking with
right.
the interview, especially the Alistair Jack interview, I'm going to tape that and I'm going to keep it, because at some point he's going to be proven to be a liar. Because I'll tell you now, the chlorinated chicken thing will happen.
I think that's another massive. I think that's another massive dead cat, though. I think
it's not hugely important in of itself.
It's a wonderful thing to mention chlorinated chicken because it drags people into listening. But the reality of what is behind all this isn't
it's
awful products.
It's the unelected committee that will decide what the devolved parliaments can and can't do.
It's the English unelected committee that will decide for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland what the rules are. What everybody is failing here, they're talking about this as being the Union, the UK. It is not. England will decide what standards Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have.
England decides everything, mate. That's been the whole...
But the point I'm making here... The point I'm making here is that has to be emphasized. This is not about the Union. This is not about a decision made by the 4 countries of the UK. This is about decisions being made for England, by England, and they're going to be forced on the other 3 nations of the Union.
But this is where Dominic Cummings has to take this Tory party, is back to English dominance, because devolution has watered it down a bit. It goes back to Tam Dalyell and the West Lothian question. That was meant to tie us in knots for decades, and the devolution settlement cut quite cleanly through that. And then they tied themselves in knots again and come up with English votes for English laws. That was meant to hamstring, in a certain manner, particularly down south, any influence that we had. The problem was they themselves discarded English votes from English laws by dragging Scots Tories in to vote on English stuff that looked like losing. This internal UK market is just another construct that they've came up with to constrain Scotland. They're not fussed about Wales and Northern Ireland. Wales and Northern Ireland, they would cut free in a second if they thought they could get away with it. It's about constraining Scotland so that we do not use our own natural resources to empower our people and enrich our country.
Well, the day the shit hits the fan is the day that they make a decision that is identifiably pro-English, anti-Welsh, anti-Scots, anti-Northern Ireland. If they choose to say that sheep bred above height cannot be sold in the UK, and they will do something that's stupid because they will ignore the other 3 countries in their decision making.
Mhm.
They will make decisions to get Tory votes, and that means decisions to suit England.
Yeah, absolutely. Norrie,
Well,
it comes down as well to the stuff we've talked about before about English exceptionalism, and they genuinely do want to ignore us because they genuinely feel they're better than us and cleverer than us.
There's just more of them.
Ah,
And they're not, as I say, that there are nice people in England. I should say, half my family are English.
aye, but Stuart, we're run by a cabal, by a cabinet that thinks an educated populace is more of a problem than an advantage. They didn't want us educated.
No,
They
they
didn't
bel-
want us knowing things.
They believe in eugenics. They believe that they are entitled to run the country because they're cleverer than the people that read the
Aye.
Sun.
And frighteningly, people like Boris Johnson believe that a degree in classics from Oxbridge or a degree in art history from St Andrews is somehow more valuable than a doctorate in quantum physics. It's ludicrous.
I've got a very difficult question. Are they wrong, Stuart?
Which question is that about?
Well, about people who aren't Oxbridge, Eton, whatever.
Right.
They've manipulated the population fairly well up to now.
There is no. I mean, this is not a new. It is not a new position. It's been going on since. Well, if you accept that the Greeks invented democracy, it's been going on ever since then. The argument about allowing the franchise to go further than the people that are educated enough to understand before they go down to vote. No, it's not new. You could, I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people in this country who would turn around and say, well, all these Sun readers and all the rest of it, they don't know what the issues are. Why should they be allowed to vote? But that doesn't give this elite, so-called self-appointed elite, the right to rubbish everybody else and to assume they have the right to run everything else.
What I'm really suggesting is they're right because they managed to manipulate the voting public.
What manipulates the voting public the most is money, Norrie. It's the fact that they have the support of massive amounts of money, and the support of the media because the media is owned by the money.
Well, you know I mean, that's not really the question about how they do it. It's that they're doing it. I mean, they've done it with Brexit.
Well, but is the question?
They do it every time the Tories get in. Why would anybody on less than 100,000 a year vote Tory?
Are we saying that just because people have a lot of money and went to a posh school, they're cleverer than the people that read the Sun and the Star and whatever? No,
of course
they've got money and they've sent their kids to posh schools, but we know how many posh, stupid, Bullingdon Club idiots there are. Oh, excitement down at the Jimmy end.
I bet. Did you think I'd fell over?
Aye.
No, I'm just. I would frame it differently. I would say the power that you manage to get your hands on is what allows you to manipulate the electoral system.
It'll never change, not in our lifetime. Power equals money, money equals power.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as simple as that.
Interestingly enough, it doesn't in the world's biggest economy. Sorry, soon to be world's biggest economy.
Oh, you mean
that
China?
that horrendous communist China that we were talking about earlier. Money doesn't equal power. Power equals influence. We've tried to turn the Chinese into like carbon copies of ourselves over the last 3 decades by opening them up to money. But all they've done is say, you know what? We'll buy up your debt and we'll continue to grow and do things our way.
Look, Jimmy, I think you've really hit a very important button, and I think we could come back and talk about it at some length in the future. It is a big difference between China and the rest of the world. In China, the Communist Party is there as like a regulator, like the EU. It's one of the rules is it doesn't allow oligarchs obvious influence running the government. They end up bad, oligarchs that get out of control, they go to jail. And to some extent, Russia's the same. There is a limit to how far people can go, but America's just some mad oligarchs fun there.
It was funny watching that BBC thing about Putin and the rise of Putin. I think it was a 2 or 3 parter.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to watch that Putin basically had this sort of tenet, particularly on his way up. You can be a cowboy if you want. Just, I'm the biggest cowboy, I'm the biggest sheriff. And if you overstep the mark, you either disappear or you run away to London with a few billion quid and never see your country again.
I'd be interested to know how many members of the People's Assembly in China are poor.
Oh, I don't know. Don't forget, you've got to have. I mean, they've been right. The Chinese Communist Party have been running the country since what, 1947? And if you're part of the party, if you join the party to get on, and you are going to be better than your neighbours, at least even just in a village, in a poor village. So it'll strike all the way through society. You don't need a degree in
No, it was just
population to
interesting.
know it.
It was just interesting because the sort of gist of what one of you was saying was, it's not about money. I'm sorry, it is about money. China is really bad for bribes, because
Well,
that's how you get on in life. You get your 3 and 6 a week wages, but you get your 200 quid in bribes.
You think it's any different in America?
You think
No,
it's
I
any
don't.
different here?
No, I don't.
What struck me this morning, actually, I must look into it for later on in the week, because no doubt we'll come back to it at some point, is I wonder how much tax Huawei have paid in the United Kingdom over the last few years. I'm assuming that they don't go in for this massive tax avoidance of the likes of Starbucks and Amazon, because if they did, it would be all over our press. So while we're looking to push them out of the country, I wonder how much money they've put into the coffers of the United Kingdom over the last few years.
Interesting one. We need to try and find that one out.
I've got a Huawei phone and I want to replace it, and my nephew, who's a techie, has advised me not to do so given the state of public political world politics. I mean, I love the phone.
You should buy an Apple phone so the Americans can listen to you.
Yeah, but they're built in China as well.
You should buy an Apple phone so the Americans and the Chinese can listen to you.
They're not interested in me.
That's what you think, Stuart. I'm surprised that you don't think they're interested in you. You've got a bit of a conspiracist look about you.
Occasionally.
You should, if you, I'm not going public with my past here, that's for sure, but I do have experience in this department. And just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not listening
watching you. Aye.
Just because Stuart's got a beard doesn't mean he wasn't James Bond 20 years ago.
Right. Anything else come out of Brewer of interest?
Well, I think we move into the other article. It was actually referenced in the Brewer. Okay,
Stuart, we'll let you go with that one.
I'll sum it up, but I won't go into the detail. Plaudits for Nicola Sturgeon fuel talk of Scottish independence drive was the headline. It was posted this morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, so it didn't presumably make the print editions of the Observer. It looks as though it's written by Robin McKee, who's a science writer for the Guardian department of the Guardian group. And Toby Helm, I see his name coming up quite a few times. Right, so it's just the way it's been commissioned to start with. It looks like, oh, we haven't got a Scottish story this week. You guys don't have anything special to do. Go and throw something together. So it looks as though it's been just chopped together. First of all, I'd just like to mention they put up the word total elimination. I'll come back with the context in a minute. That apparently Nicola Sturgeon has been aiming for. I've never heard her say that, but they've stuck it.
Stuart, we're talking about the pandemic, so it's total elimination of the pandemic in Scotland. They're putting those words into Nicola Sturgeon's mouth.
Exactly, they are doing that. And also, you know, the question of the death rate in Scotland and England, and see, there's another trope. On the downside, Scotland has the highest death rate for coronavirus in care homes in the UK. Some 47% of C19 deaths have been in care homes in Scotland, while in England the figure is about 27%. What's your reaction, Norrie?
The English are only counting people that die of coronavirus. The Scots are counting people who die of coronavirus and if it was a contributing factor.
Right. So another aspect of the article is it's clearly written from an English perspective for English readers. The SNP leader in Westminster said that his party was not shaping its COVID-19 strategy in order to open new divides with England or to bolster support for independent Scotland. Only an Englishman could possibly write that.
So the question was, excuse me, are you trying to save lives and do better than England to get independence?
And then, and another one was in a move that led our political opponents to criticise her for political posturing. Sturgeon threatened recently to close the English-Scottish border.
At no time did Nicola Sturgeon threaten to close the English-Scottish border.
But flights and trains to Scotland could be halted. No, they couldn't. This was, and then finally, what did they say at the end? Oh yes, they finished.
She hasn't got the power to close the English-Scottish border.
She doesn't need to. My son, who lives in Melbourne, was telling me yesterday on a phone call that there's a family trying to go from Victoria, which is Melbourne state, up into Queensland for a holiday. And when they arrived in Queensland, they were fined $4,000 for breaking quarantine. You don't need a barrier across the road. You just fine people lots of money.
I think I've not seen that particular article, Stuart, but it's the fact that you say they published it at 7 this morning, you're probably bang on. They realised that, hold it, wait a minute, it's Nicola Sturgeon's birthday. Everybody's got an article about her bar us. We better cobble some nonsense together. There was one in the Times that I had a look at this morning, a guy called Robert Colville, and talk about lazy journalism. He did assert that Rishi Sunak is paying the wages of 900,000 Scots. I'm pretty sure Rishi Sunak's rich, but he's not that rich. He also asserted that Luke Gordon was an impressive MP. That'd be the boy who got kicked out in his arse after 2 years in South Oakle in Perthshire and is now an advisor to Boris and Dominic because he's a pal of Michael Gove's. He also asserted, once again, all these tropes are coming out here, that Scotland's anti-English. Kate Forbes got her figures wrong when the person that accused her of getting her figures wrong on that 21 million for Sunak's 30 billion has publicly apologised because her figures were correct. He also talked about a one-party state in Scotland, which is remarkable, as we've discussed before, how a minority government can be a one-party state. And to swing it all off, he told us that the saviour of the Union was going to be Ruth Davidson because she's the most impressive figure in Scottish politics. That's the paper of record, The Times, and how they see us this week. Pile
very much. Well done, Jimmy.
Pile of nonsense.
One last thing to say. They summed up this rubbish article in The Observer by asking for a quote from Labour MP Ian Murray. And it was the same old rubbish. I'm not even going to bother quoting him.
We would like somebody, an MP from Scotland in the Labour Party, to give us a quote. Let's have a look at the list. Oh, Ian Murray. Well, we better phone Ian Murray because he's the only Labour MP in Scotland.
No, they didn't even phone him. They just snatched a quote from somewhere that had already been published.
He's probably got his own wee sideline business, Stuart, putting up quotes on a Saturday night for people to bang in the Sunday papers because they all need to have a Labour MP of some description, don't they?
I think I have a letter to write to the Times and a letter to write to the Guardian. I just
Can you write on toilet roll?
Well, not used.
So, apart from the fact that saying happy birthday, First Minister, today, is she 50 today? Is it the big one?
Yeah, the big half 100.
And tomorrow, this week we're all breathing. We're all waiting for the Russia report. I'm not. I know that it's going to be redacted, seriously redacted. Most of the names are going to be a big black line.
One of the problems they're going to have if they've redacted it out the park, and it's their own fault for waiting so long, because this could all have been done, dusted and buried now, is people are going to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, and fill in the gaps with something far more interesting than they've scrubbed out.
And their argument's going to be, well, if there was nothing in there and you've got all these sections redacted, how come you didn't publish it in October last year? They're going to look for a reason, and the government has kind of given them that reason to look.
So this is the last week before the recess, the big summer recess. But this time next week, we're into the silly season. Is that what they call it? Or is it something?
That'll be fun, Jimmy.
Aye, silly season's got. I mean, I tell you what, it's got a heck of a act to live up to. Silly season's going to have to go some this year to be sillier than what we've already put up with.
Than real politics.
Aye. Having said that, they've made a strong start with George Galloway going hand in hand down Twitter with history bird. That's the worst double act in history, Joel Stevenson and George Galloway. Oh my God. Can you imagine how much I would struggle not to mount the pavement in my taxi if I seen them in Edinburgh city centre strolling about?
I mean, something must have happened down south, because George likes as big a stage as he can get.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he left Scotland, to get a bigger stage.
I think he's toiling for cash, mate. I think he's up to his uppers and up to his oxters and receipts and bills, and he's just desperate because, let's be honest, there's going to be all kinds of weird dirt money flashing about in this election campaign.
Is George's income not normally based on suing newspapers?
Look, the one thing I've noticed about George Galloway, and it's unfortunate for the left, the far left, not the extreme left, the far left at this stage, that George Galloway is a perfect example. It's a bit like, what is it, Living Marxism, who are now taking over running the Cummings office on behalf of the far right, and yet they were called, once upon a time, they were regarded as Trotskyists, and now we've got George Galloway, who was regarded as certainly on the far left. Now he seems to get his arms wrapped around at the far right. I mean, these people are they've got no shame at all, have they?
No, whoever pays the check, they will perform the tune for them. I just think the paymasters have maybe taken a look at Tommy Sheridan and thought, you know what, it's not quite wore off yet. We better drag old gorgeous George back for one last campaign, because people still remember what Tommy got up to, and we can't use him yet.
And look, Adam Tompkins, I gather, is now going to retire from frontline politics. He's not standing for the next election. So, I mean, he's another man that moved from Marx.
Adam Tompkins is pulled out.
Aye, he's jacked it all, mate. He's not going to stand in the election next year. He's going back to lecturing public law at Glasgow University.
So how does he know what paper to read if he starts off from a Marxist perspective and ends up with Steve Bannon's breathing down his fucking
He was
neck?
a Marxist independence supporter.
Yeah. I think
this guy really did turn full 180 degrees.
I think, though, the best quote I seen about him stepping down was, I can't quite remember who it was, but they basically said that they kind of reckon that he thought as a professor in public law that he would just stroll past all the attacks and be able to absolutely wipe the floor with people in the Scottish Parliament. Then he bumped into Mike Russell in the corridor one day and got his arse handed to him, and he's never quite recovered.
I thought he was quite scary at one point. I thought he looked competent, but he's very good at jumping off the cliff and doing the mad Brexit thing, and he gets a bit extreme. If he was measured like Mike Russell, he might have succeeded. I actually thought he was a possible leader of the Scottish Conservatives.
Who?
I think he
Mike
did
Russell.
as well.
Oh yeah, that's going to happen. Stu.
Oh no, sorry, not the Conservatives. I was suddenly thinking about Mike Russell. Didn't Mike Russell stand against? Yes, he did. Stood for deputy leader against Nicola Sturgeon.
I don't know, mate. That's way back in the day. But I just, with the Tompkins thing, mate, I think Norrie as well. I think he was maybe caught out once or twice in public wearing his apron, which doesn't help if you actually want to be taken too seriously. It helps you climb the ladder, but you didn't need to be seen by the public to be wearing said thing.
It's never harmed Murdo, has it?
Well, he's never risen anywhere, has he? I mean, let's be honest, deputy leader of the Scottish Conservatives is hardly high office.
That's quite interesting, really. What's happening in the Scottish Conservatives? Ruth Davison's gone, Tompkins is going, and they were two serious heavy hitters when you looked at what was round about them.
Mm-hmm.
There is an article around today, which I'm not going to quote, which is headlined about Jackson Carlaw being useless.
Really?
Never.
Jackson, that surprises me.
Might have it up here, but we'll let
I
you
know. I'd noticed he's been seldom seen since the big party down south decided to go for legislation for face masks.
Yeah.
Is that the one
Hey, so
about
it was on
muscular?
holiday this weekend, mate. I did see something that he had a staycation in St Andrews. Unfortunately, never fell in the smoking
Oh,
bun.
did he go off to some nightclub in Malaga?
No.
It's now shut due to coronavirus.
Oh, look at this. We
Mm.
reference a decent writer because we Ginger Doug, the man, very rarely tiptoes off the fairway. Jackson Carlaw's existential crisis, July the 18th today. There you go. Go and look that one up.
I'll
July
have a
the
wee look
18th
for
was
that.
yesterday, Stuart.
Sorry?
Aye.
July the 18th was yesterday, mate.
I've kind of been avoiding blogs this weekend, seeing they've all been fighting with each other. I think when you look at the Twitter sphere in that, it's quite entertaining that there's so many people do not treat blogs like they treat other media. You know, you read a few and take a wee bit for this one, a wee bit for that one.
Aye.
There's an awful lot of people treat blogs as like some kind of messianic gospel, and some of the writers believe they're messiahs as well. They believe everything they write is absolutely 100% correct. But the old blog wars, over the last few days has been quite entertaining to watch, but I'm glad I'm having absolutely sod all to do with it.
Well, look, I'm still claiming copyright on the headline "List Wars" latest news.
I'm sort of wondering to myself if the infantile fighting is actually, in a strange way, a sign of maturity amongst our bloggers. They've now got to the point that the mainstream media has been at for some years, ripping each other to shreds.
Ken, when you'll see real maturity in the blogosphere, mate, when a couple of women's blogs actually take front and centre stage, because they'll not be involved in the pissing contest, they'll be laughing at it.
It's quite surprising, I think, that there hasn't come to the fore a really good female blogger, or a really good female blogger hasn't caught the interest, because there is a few out there.
Mm-hmm.
Leslie Riddoch should be.
Well, Leslie's got
Leslie.
a podcast, but she doesn't blog. She doesn't write, I don't think.
Well, she does. She writes once or twice a week.
She's got a national column and stuff like that. Aye, but you're right, Norrie. There are a few out there, and it's interesting that Twitter seems to revolve around the same faces, a lot of whom have been tying themselves in knots lately and have maybe just been involved with Twitter too long.
Yeah, and I think a deep breath and maybe a wee rest while the Parliament's shut.
Step out of the echo chamber. The real world is slightly different.
Everybody's going on holiday, boys. I'm going to presume you don't want to go on holiday.
No, I'm going to go back to work, I think, in the next week or so, mate.
All right.
Very good, Jimmy.
I'm really talking about the podcast.
Oh, well, he might not.
Well, no, not really, mate. We could always do, what is it, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that Nicola's doing the pressers this week? We could always do 3 a week instead of 5 for the couple of weeks that they're doing the same thing.
There you go.
Yeah, up for that. And what I thought maybe we could do is maybe delve into subjects. You know, we have other interests apart from just independence, but there's an awful lot of the big questions being asked, you know, universal basic income, monetary theory, things like that, that do impact on how Scotland might look in an independent setting.
Red sauce or brown sauce?
Aye.
That's the kind of one that I would go into, aye. But aye, we should maybe pick a topic each and over the next couple of weeks. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Tuesday, Wednesday, each have a topic.
I want to know who invented the deep fried Mars bar.
I believe it was in Fife, not Glasgow.
Well, there's a chippy at the top of Broughton Street that might dispute.
Aye, they might claim it, mate, but let's be honest, they've only been there for about 30 years. I can remember when that chippy wasn't there.
And you're a youngster.
Aye.
I was never a late night chippy man. It was always a kebab for me, I have to be honest.
Look at this! Look at the shape of me, mate. There was never an either or when I was coming home for the clubs.
Right, guys. I think we'll call it a day at that. Thanks, Stuart Lockhead. Thanks, Jimmy Hunn. I'm Noise
Bye-bye.
Stuart. Thanks for listening, folks. And we'll be back tomorrow, Monday, by which time we will have fleshed out a schedule for you, we hope.
A cunning plan.
A cunning plan, yeah. Red sauce or brown sauce, like that, Jimmy.
Could that now be a coming plan?
No. Nothing to do with him.
Too many different ways to take that.
A punning clot.
Cheers for now, folks.